And we are back here on Patriots 4th and 2. I am your host today, Derek Havens, and joining me, as always, is Mr. Steve Balscher. We are both PatsFans.com bloggers. Today we'll be talking about the Patriots' loss to the Washington Commanders on Sunday, dropping the team to an astounding 2-7. Also previewing the game in Germany this weekend versus the Indianapolis Colts ahead of their much-needed bye week. And some interesting news, Steve, that's kind of coming in as we're about to record the show. We are recording on November 8th at 11 a.m. Eastern. Before we dive into everything, though, as always, Steve, how are we doing today, man?
We're doing good. The Patriots, on the other hand, are not doing so good.
Yeah.
No. But hey, that's the way the cookie crumbles. You are what you are, as Bill Parcells used to say. And right now, they're a bad football team.
They really are. They go down. You're hosting a team in the Commanders who I feel like are a little frisky. They put up a fight, but I think it's a game that the Patriots should have won. We talked about that going into the game. You really continue to just outdo yourself, and I don't mean in a good way. They are not only making very similar mistakes, they're having some bad penalties, some bad drops. They're not running good routes. They're not tackling well. There's not a whole lot of things they're doing well as a group. And you drop the game at home 20-17. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, you go to 2-7. I don't know, Steve. I just look at it and say right now, they're a team that is struggling to do a whole lot right. Plain and simple.
Yep. I wrote in my weekly report card, they're playing like one of the worst teams in the NFL, which they are. Bad penalties, a rash of injuries, lack of attention to detail, poor situational football, and lack of a clutch gene. I don't know. Did I leave anything out?
No. I mean, the best we've seen this team look was probably that fourth quarter versus the Bills a few weeks ago, which, since then they've kind of reverted back to, again, a lot of the same mistakes, and Mac wasn't good in this game. Okay. But their problems are above and beyond just him. Although he's definitely an issue, but just putting him in a vacuum, Steve, a lot of his mistakes are error repeaters. There's a lot of the same kind of stuff with him. And I mean, I think you're seeing some mistakes with the receiving core. Again, I thought there were some really bad routes run, some really bad drops. I think Mac had a couple of good passes in this game that were really not even completed, but he was not as accurate as he typically is. But man, it just there just seems to be no fluidity at all in that passing game. I thought you saw Ramondre with a couple of decent runs. I think since moving Mike Onwenu to right tackle, you've seen an improvement on that line, but it's still not great. I mean, just the functionality of the entire offense, Steve, it just looks, kind of unbalanced, I guess. And, I hear a lot of people clamoring about Bill O'Brien's play calling. I'm not looking at it as a play calling issue, Steve, as much as an execution issue right now.
Exactly. And that's a great point because, you look at some of the plays that they called, if they execute them, they'd be successful. And you're talking about Mac Jones. I go back to that Ramondre Stevenson throw off his back foot. He throws a mortar lob into the air. And I'm like, come on. He was wide open if you just put the ball on a line. That was a big chunk play coming up because he had a lot of room to run.
Yeah.
But if we're looking at it, in a vacuum with that play, as well as several others where he made terrible decisions. But then you go back, that 40 to 50 yard pass to Jalen Reagor, they complete that. And, all of a sudden the narrative changes a bit. Because
that was a beautiful throw. I mean, honestly, it was one of the best throws he's had. It was like a 50 it was like a 50-something yard seed. I mean, and you have to, and that's unfortunately the kind of drops that we've seen Rager make in his young career. We just can't seem to haul those kind of things in.
No, and a couple of weeks ago he throws another one to Parker. Same thing. It's like, I don't know how many long passes they've completed this year, but they've dropped so many that have been thrown well. And again, I'm not saying Mac Jones is without fault. At times he was terrible in this game. But, I go back to that touchdown pass to Hunter Henry. That was a beautiful throw and catch because he put it up high where Henry would be the only one to get it. He threw it right on the line. It was perfectly thrown. Henry makes a great play, touchdown. And you watch that and you say, why can't they do this more consistently? Because it's there, but, they can't put anything together. And you talked about the offensive line. It was pretty good. I mean, granted, we know that Montez Sweat and Chase Young weren't there, but you play the hand that you're dealt because no one was, crying a river for the Patriots when all their offensive linemen were out injured early this season. But I totally agree with you in that the move for Onwenu to right tackle has been long overdue, and it's been a success for them, I think. And it's something they should keep. But, man, this was a game where you could just look and see they need an overhaul of the wide receiver position.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, they really do. And look, we started with the quarterback. I'm not. They're far and away just a quarterback away. They're so many pieces away. But I mean, at the same time, again, Mac is the quarterback of the team. Don't tell me that if you put a better quarterback under center, they wouldn't be a better team. They absolutely would be. But I just don't think. I think Mike Gesicki has been really absent. I mean, I had one of the worst takes I've ever had in the 10, 11 years we've done this show was me thinking he was going to score 10 touchdowns this season. I thought he would be a perfect fit. And sometimes I forget he's even there. I think he might forget he's there. I'm not sure. I just defensively, they've had some pretty significant injuries and man, they were giving up. I mean, how many yards did they give up in this game? 400 and something?
Yeah, it was over 400.
I mean, 325 yards for Sam Howell. He was 29 of 45. I mean, they gave up another, I'm doing some quick math here,
I think it was 120
on the ground. Yeah,
it was more than 120. It was in that range, though.
Yeah, 67, 27, 34. So yeah, I think 124 if I'm doing the math right in my head.
Okay.
But anyway, going back to your point about the chunk plays, the Patriots are 28th in the NFL in passes 20 yards or more. They have 17 on the year. As far as 40 yards go, they're tied for second. They're tied for second to last. So they have the Commanders have only had one. The Patriots have only had two. 40-yard plays or more. They're not getting the chunk plays, and this is something, Steve, that we've talked about. I remember talking about this. I mean, we're talking 4, 5, 6 weeks ago, where it's so hard for the offense to really get anything because they have to run these 16 play drives where you're getting 3, 4, maybe 5 yards a clip. And it's hard to string all those together when you have no chunk plays. And they're just not. I mean, they're just flat out not doing it. And look, the referees, again, I thought had a pretty atrocious day.
Again, how did they miss that face mask? That's all.
There were some bad calls on both sides. I mean, but
the officiating
the officiating this season in the NFL is laughable.
It's terrible. It gets worse every week. That roughing the passer call on Mac Jones, I was like, because when I saw it live, I'm like, how did they call that? And I'm thinking maybe he punched him under the pile after he sacked him, because that's what I'm looking for. Because that was a clean play. It was a good play by Washington's defense. It wasn't dirty at all. And you're allowed to tackle the guy when he still has the ball.
And Claire writes in, "Be good if Juju didn't drop."
Well, we're going to get to that.
We'll get to that. I was saying this to Steve offline yesterday. It's come to the point with the Patriots now where they're playing so poorly. I'm almost expecting things like that to happen at the end of games because they're a bad team. They've shown they're a bad team, and bad teams find a way to lose games just like good teams find a way to win them. And right now, that's what's happening.
In regards to that, I had it in my notes. I'm sitting there watching the game, and I was thinking to myself, it wasn't a great day, but Juju was having a good day. I thought his best day as a Patriot. He was catching the ball. He was moving the chains, and then he made that play on 4th down, which I thought was an incredible catch. That was, I thought, incredible. You watched him reach out for that and snag the ball in.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, he's having a good day. And I said to myself, keep feeding him the ball. He's going to score the winning touchdown.
Well, you were close. You were kind of circling it.
I had half of that right.
Yeah, and I thought Mac Jones had a very atypical day from an accuracy standpoint. He had some good throws, like we said, but I just thought he was off target. His ball placement wasn't as good as we've been accustomed to. I mean, you can say a lot of things about him negatively if you want to. I think his accuracy is relatively good most of the time, and I thought his receivers bailed him out with 5 or 6 catches in that game, one that you just alluded to. I just want to go ahead and make a note to please subscribe to us on YouTube and Apple Podcasts. Like, share, leave us a review. Keeps us high in the podcast ranking so other Patriots fans can find us. Steve, I don't know where you want to go from here, but we were talking. I mean, why don't you go to where you want to go to next? I mean, we can.
Well, I just wanted to make a quick mention. A couple of years ago, there was an incident where Pat Chung was facing charges. We all remember that, and the media was all over him. And, a lot of Patriot beat writers and stations were all over him. And he was acquitted. And, I haven't seen a peep online about that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, that's true.
Not a peep. That after all that, they haven't said a word that he's been found innocent, which he was saying all along he was. Nobody cared to believe him. So now he put a post up on Twitter where he used some colorful language to the people that pronounced him guilty right off the bat. I just wanted to share that.
That was the cocaine incident?
Yes. In his house in New Hampshire.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it turns out he was right. There was people that broke into his house and were partying there.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I was there with a couple of my friends. It was a good time.
I'm gonna relay that to Pat,
Yeah, no, good. I mean, good for Patrick Chung. Kind of getting his name cleared, But
I just thought it was interesting that nobody ran with it after the fact.
Well, unfortunately, Steve, there's been other news.
Yes.
I
figured I'd lead in with the good stuff.
Right. Yeah. And so Patrick Chung, acquitted is not as juicy as J.C. Jackson benched or left in the U.S. as the team travels to Germany, which, we can get to. Before we get to that, though, Steve, I mean, we haven't really talked about the defense or really anything else about the game. So defensively, give me your thoughts on their performance in this week's game versus the Commanders.
Well, coming in, we were wary of Washington's speed. They have a bunch of very good, speedy receivers. I mean, their receivers are very good. I mean,
McLaurin's a stud. They didn't have Curtis Samuel because of toe injury. Jahan Dotson hasn't quite realized his potential yet, but he's very good.
Like
Logan Thomas is solid in the red zone. They have 2 good running backs. They have pieces around them.
Yeah. And like you said, Sam Howell's feisty. I mean,
yeah.
And I knew it was going to be one of those kind of days when they had him at 3rd and 23 and he ran for 24.
That was, what that reminds me of?
Killer.
Like, as good as the Patriots were in the early 2000s, how many times did they give up 3rd and longs? You know what I mean? It was 3rd and 13 and they would give up 14 or 15. early on in Tom Brady's career, again, the defense was almost always terrific, but I feel like there was a period of time, maybe he was a little later than that, where they just gave up these long third downs, and Jesus, that 24-yard scramble, it just felt so deflating, and you can tell the players, and we've talked about this before, how the attitude element is so important on the defensive side of the ball, and you can just see the players are just not on all sides of the ball. They're just not playing with any confidence at all right now. There's no fire, it's exuding into the game.
There's no fire out there. That's where I think they really missed Judon, because he's kind of like that guy,
Yeah, and I think
and I think
a little bit of the way, I think Kendrick Bourne too. You lose some of those high energy guys, kind of keep those good vibes going. Where hey, you lit up a bad play, well, hey, we'll shake it off, and then we'll go ahead and live to fight another down. And it just seems very, I don't know. It just seems like they're just not able to try to turn that page as quickly.
No, and it's to me, it's getting worse, because this whole J.C. Jackson news, the Jack Jones news, the cracks are starting to become visible. And then you have to read between the lines. Guys like Matthew Slater, David Andrews, they keep repeating the mantra, we're still together. It's telling me that
they're trying to convince themselves.
Yeah, I think it sounds more like that than, hey, things are falling apart. I think with those guys coming out and the way they're wording things, because these are two very well-respected vets. And David Andrews, I find him very refreshing every week, because he's always the first guy out there, win or lose. And he tells it like it is. He doesn't sugarcoat stuff. I mean, he's not going to throw anybody under the bus.
No, but it's refreshing to see a pro athlete,
accountability,
rain or shine, to kind of take the accountability. Yeah. I thought Juju did a nice job of that after the drop at the end of the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, unlike, Jackson or Jones, who were already dressed and out the door, but when the reporters walked in, it's another side issue.
I mean,
that's a joke. I'm sorry. You're paid well to play a game, and that's part of being a pro, is like, you got to handle that. I mean, I think that's a joke.
To Juju's credit, he stood up and said, that was my fault. He took accountability for that. And, he said it was a good pass, which it was. I mean, it was right in his hands. Mm-hmm. It was a very tight window, but he delivered the ball right where it needed to be. And only Juju could have caught that. Unfortunately, it bounced off his hands and went straight up. If he had just dropped it and hit the ground, you still have third down to make, 8-10 yards to get in field goal range. But it's the way it is.
No, I agree. And, Chris writes in, I was going to ask, do you think some of the players have lost faith in some of the coaches? And I don't see how they haven't. I'm not saying every single player or every single coach, but you're 2-7 right now. You're running into a lot of these same mistakes. There's going to be some issues with some trust, from, the player's side, from the coach's side. I think both. I mean, and Bill, I think traditionally has coached people harder when times get a little tougher. And I think that if you continue to lose, that can sometimes have a negative effect, where in the past, if they did have a couple of rough games, they were usually able to bounce out of it because you had 12 under center and you'd still end up in the playoffs or something. Now you're looking at, we thought there was a chance if they beat the Dolphins. I thought there was a legitimate chance they beat the Dolphins. We could be talking about them at 5-5 at the bye week. I'm not sure they're going to get to 5 wins on the season at this point. It doesn't feel great. So, but we'll cross that bridge when it comes. But to your point, though, Chris, or to your question, I would say I think it's hard to imagine that some players haven't lost some faith in some of the coaches. What about you, Steve?
I think you can see it. There's a disconnect somewhere in that secondary, because both Jackson and Jones were off the reservation, as you said. before the media was even allowed into the locker room, which is usually 15, 20 minutes after a game. They were already dressed and gone, which tells you all you need to know.
Right. And I mean, let's talk about the, Jack Jones and JC Jackson situation. A couple of things. So they were benched to start this last game on Sunday, Steve, as you know, as we talked about offline, as many of our listeners know. I'm not reporting this. And I think it was floated out a little bit. I just had heard they missed either a practice. They either were late or missed a practice or meeting. I've heard a couple different things. I don't know. I would say that's probably a situation where, I just think when you have issues like that with a team that's already kind of having some struggles, that the coaches felt like they needed to kind of put their foot down and say, look, it's, whatever. I think tying it into the lack of accountability and leaving before the reporters got there after the game, I don't think makes it feel any better, Steve.
No, not at all.
And then you have the news this morning that came out about a little less than an hour ago that JC Jackson is not traveling with the team to Germany as he, quote unquote, needs a mental reset. And I believe it was either Tom Pelissero or Mike Garafolo who said that we'll see if the relationship is salvageable. I don't know. I think there's a good chance JC Jackson's not with the team after the bye week. I think it could go either way. It wouldn't surprise me if he was not with the team. But it sounds like it can go either way, Steve.
Yeah. And again, it just shows there's cracks in the foundation now.
Yeah.
I mean, you can overlook some of this stuff when you're 7-2.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're 2-7, that's when the guys inside the locker room start asking questions. What are we doing here? What's the plan? How are we getting out of this? And you're seeing guys, getting jettisoned like this or not getting on the plane to Germany. He's going to miss out on all that great sausage in Frankfurt. I mean,
something tells me he doesn't really care about that, but
yeah, well, give his seat to me on the plane.
Yeah, I'd take the aircraft over to Germany, check it out with the guys. I wouldn't mind doing that. Hanging out with David Andrews, throwing down some good food.
There you go.
A Hefeweizen will be fine.
Yep.
So look, I mean, I think you can look at this as a micro and macro situation. Micro meaning, obviously, it's not good to have one of your players that you really kind of need at corner that has had success with you in the past, but really be off to a real shaky start. The macro issue to me, Steve, is that as you deemed it, and I kind of like that terminology, crack in the foundation. You're seeing things with this team so far this year that you traditionally just don't see with this team that you really see with a lot of bad teams. Okay. And I hate to be doom and gloom. I know some people will laugh at that. I don't want to be doom and gloom all the time. Okay. But right now there's just not a whole lot of good things to feel about the team. I mean, they just feel like I enjoy watching. I obviously enjoy watching the team. I cannot wait for this offseason to get here. They just need to clean house in like so many different ways. And I think you're looking at a situation, Steve, where you are kind of finding out guys who should be with the team at all. That's why I have if Marcus Jones and Christian Gonzalez were not hurt, I do not think JC Jackson is with this team right now. But they're in a situation where they feel like maybe they need him.
They do, unfortunately, because Sean Wade, they started him early. And he didn't do so well. I'll be kind there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was not great. I don't know. So the JC Jackson situation to me, again, to recap, I think that when you're talking about whether the relationship is salvageable, not traveling with the team, benched last week, potentially obviously there was some kind of reason they had to discipline him. So I don't know, whatever the reason is, they felt strong enough that they didn't want him to start the game. So
Same with Jackson.
And same with Jack Jones, right?
Jack Jones, excuse me.
So, well, J.C. Jackson, Jack Jones. There's a lot of J's going on.
I know there's so many Jones, Jack. It's
right.
like, oh my God.
But either way, I just don't look at it as a situation that's a good one, and I think it's a. I just think it's kind of like where you're at. Like it kind of sums up where you're at right now. Just so many issues.
Yeah, and another thing that happened on Sunday was all week we heard Keishon Butte had his best week of practice. That was Bill's exact words. He had his best week of practice. And obviously they told him he was going to be a big part of the game plan, because then he went on social media and, he said so. And then all of a sudden, inactive. Yeah. And that tells me, there's bad moon rising, right? I
think what you're seeing is not only are the players not good enough on the field, I think you're seeing that they are losing the locker room a little bit here. I mean, and it's got to be one of those situations that they got to fix, or it's going to get ugly fast. I think you're seeing guys that are upset with their opportunity or upset they're being put in certain positions, and I just think it kind of comes through. And we have a couple other comments here I wanted to share. Joel writes in, what's up, Joel? J.C. Jackson is a good depth piece, not starter material anymore. I'm sure the Chargers certainly think so. I would say, I don't think he's necessarily a great starter. I think that if they had all their secondary pieces in place, Steve, and things were going good, I think he would be able to contribute. But I just think we're considering how many pieces they've lost. He's forced probably in a higher role and they're losing. I don't think he's necessarily a guy you want to build your locker room around. I would say it's starting to go the other way, which is the concern.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then Chris writes in, how big a miss will basically Adrian Clem is away from the team right now. That was the other news that came out. He missed a Zoom meeting with the reporters earlier this week, and Mike Reese was on the Zolak and Bertrand show on 98.5, and he basically he just thought it was weird. I don't want to put words in Mike's mouth or anything, but he basically was. Everyone was kind of wondering, why was he absent? Was there something going on, behind the scenes or whatever? And it turns out it's something health related, and he's going to be away from the team for a little while. So I think that's certainly a little bit of a concern. They have played better on that offensive line, I would say, the last couple of weeks. They've seemed to have gotten that figured out a little bit. Unfortunately, the rest of it hasn't come along as we were hoping for.
Well, I'm curious because he has a health-related thing. He's going to be away for a while. Calvin Anderson, offensive line guy.
We know he was sick for the second time this year with apparently two different illnesses.
Yeah, I'm curious what the heck is going on there. I mean, and again, I mean, I don't know how big a miss he'll be. It's time for some of those assistant, offensive line coaches to step up.
Agreed.
I'm sure, Bill O'Brien will help out there because, being the offensive coordinator, if he sees something going on. And I think guys like David Andrews, they'll step into a bigger role, I guess, leadership wise.
Sure. No, and I agree with that wholeheartedly. So we'll see. I mean, who's able to step up, and I have no idea what the issue is with Clem. Part of me at first thought it was potentially a situation where maybe there was some, maybe they were just upset with the performance. I don't think it's the case. I think there's something else going on. So something to think about. Aside from that, let's see here. We got a couple more comments here. Let's see here. Chris writes in, if the season was to end now, who would you want to be the OC in, he says 2034, but I think he means next year. BOB or Josh, or is it too early to debate this? I I would say right now, I would probably keep Bill O'Brien just to kind of keep some kind of continuity. If you're talking right now, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know. I mean, there's so many variables with that question because in my mind, who's the head coach? Who's the quarterback? Who's, what are we like? If you're telling me you're coming back with Mac Jones and Bill Belichick, then I want to keep Bill O'Brien. I really don't want to change Mac's OC for again every single
Fourth
season.
time in 4 years.
Yeah, come on. I mean, I'm not. I've really lost a few people who are traditional, like regular listeners, have know that I've kind of lost a lot of faith in whether Mac can be the guy long term. But I also don't think it'd be fair for it to go ahead and have another change to coordinator. Can we have some continuity here? So I don't know. That would be mine, but something to say. Joel writes in Connor McDermott looked okay on the O-line.
He did.
I thought he played pretty well. I agree. So before we switch over to the Colts, we'll step aside for podcast purposes really quick. Just take a quick break. And we come back, we'll talk about the Patriots trip to Germany and the upcoming game versus the Indianapolis Colts. All right, and we are back here on Patriots 4th and 2. Again, Derek Haven, Steve Balsherry started talking off about the 20-17 loss to the Washington Commanders. Got into the J.C. Jacksons, Jack Jones news, Adrian Clem news. Busy week, busy day with news. And now you're talking about, Steve, we're talking about the team and going through struggles, and maybe we're starting to question some of the players' buy-in. Now they're traveling away from their families or even with their families, but they're traveling 10 extra hours away.
Mm-hmm.
Bye weeks around the corner.
That's a long plane ride.
Bye weeks around the corner. Do you worry? I think they should win this game like I thought they were going to win last week.
Yeah.
But
with
the bye week around the corner.
I'll be honest that, I had, like you, I had high hopes that they would pull a rabbit out of their hat.
Mm-hmm.
Beat Miami and then go into the bye, like you said, at 5-5. And all of a sudden, you'd be looking at the season saying, they're not in bad shape at this point. They went through a meat grinder early schedule. They played terrible, but now all of a sudden, they'd be going into the bye week with things trending upward. So we're not looking at that now. And looking at this Colts game, I mean, this is a game they absolutely should win. Are they going to? I have serious doubts now.
I think right now, we've talked about this for weeks. You can't pencil in any win with this team right now.
Not anymore.
No. I think the Colts have been competitive in a lot of their games. I think they've looked, obviously they missed their quarterback, but I think also Gardner Minshew is similar to Sam Howell, similar to like Taylor Heineke. Like you don't really know which version you're going to get that day. He could put up 350 yards, but he could also throw 3 interceptions, Steve. It's like I don't know what you're going to get from Gardner Minshew.
Exactly. And, he's one of those old, school gunslingers. I mean, he's one of those, you give me the ball and I'm going to sling it in there. I don't care if this guy's surrounded by 5 guys, that's his mentality. And there's something to be said for that at times, sure, because he doesn't feel like there's no play he can't make. Mm-hmm. And you got to love that kind of confidence in a guy, but sometimes he goes overboard. But, if you're talking about a backup quarterback, I don't believe he's a viable starter, but he's an excellent backup because of that confidence. He can come in and give you, what you need at the time. And, right now the Colts are in pretty good shape. They're 4-5. They're not out of the playoff race by any stretch. So, that's the kind of thing that worries me, as well as Jonathan Taylor. So.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think Minshew is a starter, but he's kind of been thrust into that position now. And again, I don't know. It's like a coin flip with him, what version of him you're going to get. I also, like I said to start, after the break, I'm worried about the team having a long plane ride and the bye week around the corner, I'm wondering if they're just like, just get us to the bye week. Like they just need everyone probably in that building is probably just frustrated with their own performance, with someone else's performance, with being yelled at for sucking from fans or the media or whatever. So I think that's a real factor. I know some people don't want to hear that, but I think that's a legitimate thing where they could just be mentally a little burned out, Steve.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just, they went through a gauntlet early in the season and it took its toll on them.
Mm-hmm.
I look at Indy and they're still very much, like I said, in the swing of things. Not saying they're going to make the playoffs, but they're not out of it by any stretch. And you never know with Minshew. He gets on a hot streak, he can carry them for a few games. And for the Colts, just like we said for the Patriots, this is a winnable game.
What's your first thought kind of looking at the Colts team, when you go into this matchup from a Patriots perspective?
Looking at the Colts, I think, they have not a formidable group of receivers, but they're the kind of guys that can turn a game. And right now, the Patriots secondary is really iffy. So you have to look at, how well are they protecting Minshew? Can the Patriots get after him and force him into one of those other kind of Minshew games where he throws 3 picks?
Mm-hmm.
But I worry about Jonathan Taylor. We remember the last time they played the Colts.
Yep.
That late season game. I mean, that was a few years ago. So, it's totally 2 different teams at that time. But, he's one of those guys that can rumble and bumble and stumble and just grind you down, and I just worry about the mental makeup of this Patriots team right now.
I think their defense plays hard. They can run the ball, and they have a quarterback that's not afraid to sling it. I'm not saying that it's going to work out for him all the time, but I also think that they could potentially, if things go well, I'm worried about this Patriots team scoring, like plain and simple. And so if the Colts want to grind it out and play defense and run the ball, I look at that as a benefit for the Patriots. They keep the score down, and this is good. Someone's going to win this game 17-13,
Yep.
If the Colts start slinging it around a little bit, you have Michael Pittman. Josh Downs has looked pretty good so far. They have a couple other guys there, but, you have a couple of guys in the passing game. I'm worried about where they are mentally at the cornerback position. And again, if they're going to if the Colts are going to kind of muck it up, I just think we're going to find out a lot about this Patriots team the next couple of weeks in terms of if they're going to give up and the bottom's going to totally fall out, because it looks like it's about to, Steve. It really does. But are we going to find out if they're going to kind of dig deep and we're going to see, some effort, or are we going to see it just totally collapse?
Yeah. And again, to answer Todd's question, we did talk about J.C. Jackson earlier. But that's what I wrote in my, weekly report card. Have they hit rock bottom, or are they continuing to dig? And I do think that is a legitimate question right now, because, it was like, once again, the game's in front of you. You have an opportunity to pull it out. They moved the ball down the field. You remember, they started deep in their own end, and you're seeing them get not chunk plays per se, but, some intermediate passes, and they're moving the ball. They get down. They're almost in field goal range. So, the tie is still there, but then the wheels come off. And how many times can you do that in one season before the team falls apart? And I think we're right at that precipice. And, I've been saying for a while, this week, we're going to see what this team is made of. You and I have both been saying that. I have my doubts that they're going to respond positively. Excuse me.
I mean, I could talk myself into both. I could see it being a situation where I do like if those some of these external factors we're talking about weren't factors, I think I would pick the Patriots to win. I'm worried about some of these variables that we're talking about that really gets into the buy-in, the emotion, the effort level. I don't think we've really seen guys quit on the field. I'm not looking at plays and I'm like, this guy just totally gave up. I do think that you're seeing a lot of mental errors on the field, but I think that you're seeing some of the quit in some of the actions, whether it's in the locker room after the game or whether it's disciplinary stuff. And again, that's kind of building. So yeah, Todd, we did talk about the JC Jackson situation already, but it all kind of ties into, I don't think this isn't the only guy in there, that is having these kind of questions come up with, but it's not a good situation. And I don't know if we go, Steve, right to our three keys. Why don't we talk about how the Patriots can win this game? Why don't you kick it off?
First key, get your head out of your fourth point of contact. I mean, how many times have we talked about this and we just did again? The mental mistakes, the penalties, I mean, think about it. Late in the game, they're down by 3. They hold Washington, right? 3 and out. And they punt the ball, and Demario Douglas, who's been one of the few bright spots on this, him and Hunter Henry offensively. Demario Douglas runs it back to the Patriots 43. They're in great shape. I mean, there's plenty of time. You're at your 43-yard line. You can go down and score a touchdown and win the game that you probably shouldn't have, but it's there. Then, they get Mac Wilson for lining up offside, which I still, I don't know. The angle I saw, I'll have to rewatch it again, but it didn't look like he was lined up. But
I saw one that looked like he was, but it did have some of that D Ford element to it, going back to that Chiefs game years and years ago, where some people thought he wasn't, and some people was like, no, it's pretty clear.
Yeah, I guess
there was some weird stuff. Either way, to your point, because I'm just gonna. I mean, we traditionally don't do this, but this is one of my keys too. It's the mental mistakes. I mean, it's Mac Jones's. It's the Mac Jones interception issues. Where he doesn't drive the ball sometimes and he gets sloppy with his mechanics. It's the bad route running for the receivers. It's the mental mistakes for the penalties on defense. It's like the same stuff every week. Like, they clean that up and they'll have a better chance to win these games. But the mental errors are number one with a bullet for me.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's like, instead, they kill more time off the clock, and then they start at their 9-yard line, 8-yard line, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, that's a 35-yard swing with a lot of time off the clock.
Mm-hmm.
And it was self-inflicted. It wasn't anything Washington did. It was a self-inflicted mistake, and you can't have those. It's one thing if, like, hey, you're calling a zero blitz and their guy just beats your guy physically down the field. They throw a touchdown. You can live with that. But when, you hand them the ball back and you end up starting deep in your own end, inside the 10, instead of at your own 43 with 3 more minutes off the clock, that's just inexcusable. And it goes to the head guy.
Todd goes, how about the 3rd and 6 slinging it 25 yards downfield? I was just thinking that same thing.
Yeah. Well, if you complete it, then everyone's, waving the flag. What a great call.
Sure. Sure. We know that's a double-edged sword. All right. Keep going,
but
Steve.
Typically, like this team, it'd be 3rd and 6 and they'd run a 5-yard route. Yeah, they complete the pass and they're a yard short.
Yeah, they've had that's another thing that I don't know if it's a Bill O'Brien thing. If I have to blame the players for the execution, obviously, but to me, Bill O'Brien's got to take some kind of responsibility. The amount of times that they're running routes like 1 or 2 yards short of the sticks, I just can't imagine that is how they're coaching it up.
You learned that in Pee Wee football,
right?
I mean, if you need 5, you run a 6-yard route, you catch the football, you move the chains.
Yeah.
I mean, that's football 101 stuff.
It's basic stuff. That's why I have a hard time believing Bill O'Brien's not coaching it that way, but I have to put it on him because it's
Well,
all
and
of them.
again, I not so much O'Brien, and nobody wants to say his name, but it's Troy Brown. He's your wide receivers coach.
I know.
And you know what? I go back to what Bill used to say, like in the early age of the Super Bowl winning teams. Wide receivers have two jobs: get open and catch the ball.
Yep.
And they're not doing either.
No.
And you know, I know Troy Brown's an icon. We all love Troy Brown.
Yep. One of my favorite
But you
players
have
of
to
all
put a
time.
lot of this on his plate too. Granted, he's not working with, you know, the greatest show on turf, but you know,
Yeah, but it's
running
one of those areas that if Bill is here next year, I think you have to look at trying to find some coaches that because you're seeing mistakes over the last few years that you just shouldn't. And like you said, I hate to say it, but it's the truth. You got to look at Troy a little bit there too.
yeah. And Todd makes a great point. He knows Pop Warner players who are more disciplined, and I would agree with that.
Right. No, I get it. Did you finish all 3 of your keys? I forget.
No, number one was get your head out of your fourth point of contact, which is
Sure.
your butt. Okay. For those who don't know paratrooper lingo, you know, your fourth point of contact when you land is your butt. I won't say the other word. Second key,
It's a family
you
show.
know, it's run the football. And one thing we didn't talk about, Ramondre Stevenson gets a 64-yard touchdown. Great play design. They had a huge gap for him to get through.
You could have drove a
When
truck
I
through that
saw
thing.
that gap, I was like, they're going to have a hard time bringing him down because he was at full speed going through the line. And then, as much as we faulted Jalen Reagor earlier, he made a great block
He did.
in the secondary, and he was gone. And then what happened? The rest of the game, Stevenson had 5 carries. 5.
Yep.
They need to run the football and, you know, assert their will. Obviously, your passing game isn't getting it done. Just push the ball down somebody's throat and let your offensive lineman tee off. We talked about, Connor McDermott coming in and playing pretty well. I thought, especially, you know, he had struggled so badly. They elevated from the practice squad. I thought he did a really good job. Let him tee off. Let these guys tee off and play physical. And, you know, the Colts aren't a great run defense. So keep driving the ball down their throats and wear them down.
Mm-hmm.
And my third key is, I mean, this is, you know, a time where they have to get the bad Minshew, you know, get some pressure on him, make him make some stupid decisions, as he's apt to do at times. I mean, he's a gunslinger. He'll thread the needle, but he also throws a lot of picks. Since he's come in, he's thrown 8 touchdowns, but 5 picks. So it's time to do that, the opposite on him.
No, I totally agree. I would say, Steve, I mean, this is a really boring one because my first two keys are similar as yours. I mean, they got to clean up the mental errors, and you have to go ahead and the run game's got to be in focus, not only offensively to commit to Stevenson a little bit more. And as Todd says in the comments, I missed the fullback. I missed the fullback too. I also think that obviously Jonathan Taylor, you have to worry about him and controlling him and not let him take things over. And the third key for me, Steve, honestly, is I just want to see them finish games, you know, and they're running the same issues at the end of these games where they're just failing to execute in that fourth quarter. So I want to see a strong finish from the team. Final thoughts for me, Steve. I'll go first with this one. My final thought on this game is that I think this game could be incredibly important for how the rest of the season is going to play out. I think that, again, going into the bye week, if you have a long plane ride, it's going to get longer if you lose. I think that from a locker room perspective, from morale, I think you need to win this game, Steve. And this could be a big one. I think if you lose this game, I think you're going to see more players, not necessarily like revolt, but maybe miss time due to injury or whatever. I just think it could get ugly. So I think that this is a really big game to kind of circle and star and be like, they could really use this one. Or I think some of the news that we've heard over the last 24 to 48 hours, I think it's only going to get worse.
So what's your prediction?
Prediction for the game, I'm going with the Patriots to win this game. I'm going to go 20-16.
Very good. I agree with all your comments, but I'm going the other way. Until they start winning some of these games, I'm not going to predict them winning this one either.
The reason I'm picking, because I agree, I was leaning towards taking the Colts. And I am worried about a lot of these variables we've talked about for the majority of the show. Sincerely, I just think that we're going to, traditionally Belichick's done well against quarterbacks that are a little more erratic, and Minshew is. So I think he's just going to I think we're going to be sitting back being like, the Patriots defense had a really good day. Minshew was kind of all over the place. He might put up 300 yards and like some plastic stats, but I think he's going to be the reason we look at and say the Patriots win the game.
Yeah.
If it was almost anybody else starting, I honestly probably would take the Colts.
Yeah, I'm going with the Colts in this one. I don't think they're going to get enough bad Minshew on Sunday. I hope I'm wrong. I got Colts 27-17.
All righty. So, just like everyone was hoping for as they tune into our show, a lot of high energy, positive talk today. I feel like we just had a funeral for the team. Yeah, pulling that hair out. I think your hair is getting more gray throughout the season.
Yeah, it is.
Yep.
It definitely is. I didn't have it tied up today, so it's a mess right now. But it's been that kind of a day.
Yeah, it has been. I just want to say thanks again for everyone who commented, who tuned in live. Again, please subscribe to us on YouTube and Apple Podcasts. Like, share, leave us a review. Keeps us high in the podcast ranking so other Patriots fans can find us. Steve, what time is the game kicking off for you Eastern? Is that 9:30?
9:30.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Is
it
9:30 or 10:30?
I think it's 9:30 for you.
Is it?
Yeah, it's that early window now that they changed the clocks, I believe. We'll have to double check that. But yeah, it's going to be the Patriots kick off the football window. I'm sure most people will be glad they'll be asleep or at church or running errands or something. But we'll tune in next week. Hopefully we're talking about a good win. We can talk about what they need to accomplish over the bye. We'll be back next week, hopefully on Wednesday, like we have been doing. And we'll see you guys next week. Thanks for listening.